Happy New Year, everybody. It's another year gone by, and I still haven't got this channel off the ground. Please help me. But I think we've talked about some interesting things, and we've had a fantastic, amazing year in politics, in news. And as you know, what I'm trying to do here is give some context and perspective to the news, so we don't have to get so involved and excited in it. And if we do get excited by it, it's just because we're interested in it and we know really what's going on, not just what other people want to make us excited about, what the political parties, what the media. So tonight, I just wanted to specifically remember two people, one who's alive, one who's not, former president and deceased president now, Jimmy Carter, and also Biden, who is still president for a time. And with Jimmy Carter passing away at the age of 100, it sort of almost links together in the mind two one-term presidencies that now in the fullness of time, after the election we've just had, and certainly in the fullness of time since Jimmy Carter was in office, we could see these as mentioned here, troubled presidencies, presidencies that were not entirely clear on their direction, often that had issues with leadership for certain reasons. This was, a lot has been written. I was actually surprised that the media acknowledged how troubled or even failed the presidency of Jimmy Carter was. It seemed to me like a lot of effort in the years after he left office. There was a lot of effort to rejuvenate his legacy, although a lot of it focused on his activities after he was president. He had that Habitat for Humanity where they built houses for people who didn't have houses, and he eventually won Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know exactly what it was for, but he also had this great thing about eradicating diseases, and okay, here it is. I found it. He had this idea about certain diseases. Maybe if they were not all over ensconced in nature, you could eradicate them. And one of them was a guinea worm. I don't know how it's pronounced, guinea worm. And this is a little worm that goes into your foot, and it kind of makes you like a sleepy zombie. Guinea worm disease could become the second human disease in history after smallpox to be eradicated, and they identified how you could upset the life cycle of this animal. And it's kind of interesting because this is a case where we're trying to cause an animal to become extinct. And he had I can't find the website now, but years ago, they had a whole list of diseases that they were analyzing, both done by microorganisms or little worms or anything that caused disease, to see how much money, time it would take to actually wipe that out. And that was an interesting thing that the Carter Center did. But this was after Carter was president, and here we have a pretty good article on his presidency. I know there's a lot being said. I mean, I'm old enough. I shook Jimmy Carter's hand before he was president at a campaign stop in Indianapolis. And there was a lot of excitement about him. And later on one of our vacations, we stopped at Plains, Georgia, his hometown. A little, really nothing, hardly anything in that town way back then. A very dusty town way out in the back 40 of Georgia. I'm sure it's grown since then. And so he was certainly a different kind of person. And he, like Clinton, was a Southern Democrat, kind of liberal. But for a long time, that sort of Clinton-Carter idea of a Southernish liberal, but not too liberal, was considered the kind of Democrat who could win over the Republican juggernaut of presidents that went on for so long with Reagan and then Bush. So Carter initiated in that, for someone who was growing up in the 70s, it was all gloom and disaster. And nobody then thought America was the greatest country in the world, and nobody liked our military. And I guess maybe since they wiped out JFK one way or another, he hardly had any presidency at all. And then the disastrous presidency of LBJ, who's an interesting character, but really got us into Vietnam, an unwinnable war. Then the bizarre corrupt dealings of Nixon, and the way he was, and the resignation, and the loss of the war in Vietnam, right within a compact time period. And then you had the two kind of mini failed presidencies of Gerald Ford, the first president, who was sort of an appointed president. He didn't serve. He wasn't elected as vice president nor as president, because the vice president under Nixon had to resign over a separate tax issue, Spiro Agnew, and then Ford went in there, I believe, as the Speaker of the House. And then when Nixon resigned, it made Gerald Ford the first unelected president that nobody actually voted for. But then when he asked people to vote for him, they didn't vote for him, and they voted for Carter instead, which was another funny little presidency that didn't work in a lot of ways. You'll be reading a lot about him. I just wanted to say some of the things that came up into my mind about Carter. There's this stuff about, he made human rights, to link human rights to our support of a country, and that sort of it led to the United States turning away from our allies, our strategic allies, and caused a lot of trouble in the world, although it sounds like on the surface an admirable thing. And I know a lot of people are talking about what happened in Iran, because it's pretty widely accepted that the U.S. government under Carter gave the nod to that they would allow the Shah, our steadfast ally there, to be overthrown. And that was the whole genesis of Islamic fundamentalism that has terrorized the world to this day. And I know there's both Sunni and Shiite, but that precedent of that very strict state spread and has sort of contaminated a lot of that area of the world, and that goes firmly back to Jimmy Carter's policies. He kind of lucked into the peace accords in Israel, and again, it was often thought that he sided more with Yasser Arafat, or he was not close enough to Israel, and did not recognize how important our ties were with that country at the time. He presided over the 3 Mile Island incident, and has some interesting stories about him as a person, because he was a fascinating character. His knowledge. He was in the military. He worked on a nuclear submarine, so he knew how to do all the calculations for the reactors on pen and paper, which those guys have to do in case like the computers go out. So when people from 3 Mile Island were trying to explain to him that it's no big deal about what's happening in the radiation that's being emitted, he asked for the figures, and he realized, because of his background, they were not telling him the truth. We have a situation, both Gerald Ford presidency before Carter and Carter's presidency, when it came to time to re-election, you can always tell in the American system if there's going to be a problem, if the incumbent has challengers within his own party. So, Gerald Ford had a bunch of people, including Ronald Reagan, challenge him for re-election, and Carter had Ted Kennedy challenge him in the primaries. So that's always seen as an issue of trouble. Now, this is another parallel to today to Biden, because despite what the media and the politicians told you throughout the last year before the election, they knew maybe for many years Biden couldn't do anything. He was perhaps senile. They just lied to the people to tell them it was the other way around, and that he was fine. However, they knew the truth of what was going on, so they were worried about incumbents challenging Biden in the primaries. So they reconfigured the primaries, moving the initial Iowa caucuses later in the primary cycle that would prevent any a challenger within the party from challenging Biden. And there were other things. It's totally legal. You know, the primaries were rigged in Biden's behalf in that way. And if you say rigged, you might think there's something illegal, but it's all nice and legal. This is what you get in the political sphere. The politician lawyers will just, if you say, gosh, this is wrong and unethical, they'll just say, nice and legal. But that's another parallel that Biden probably would have had primary challengers if not his party had closed ranks to make sure the system guaranteed he would be the only candidate in the primaries, and they could continue to tell everyone he was fine. That was a very disastrous decision. You know, there's a good George Will editorial in the Washington Post talking about how Carter's presidency created the necessity for Ronald Reagan and the Reagan Revolution, and it did usher in 12 years of Republican presidencies and policies with, you know, the strong defense, the strong economy, an emphasis on deficit reduction, internationalism, open trade, all the things that Democrats were just opposed to. You know, the Democrats, when they got in at that era, said, you know, we're always going to have to raise taxes. The budget's always going to rise. We can't have free and open trade and internationalism, et cetera, et cetera. And the Reagan Revolution was so successful at that. The next presidency, Clinton, essentially continued that. And in a way, I always use, at the time I used to say, well, it's Reagan Clinton, because Clinton did all the things that the Republicans promised they would do. Clinton balanced the budget. Clinton continued a wise international policy. He continued all the Republican policies of open and free trade with other countries that the Democrat Party, which was historically it was a very pro-labor party, they had been against. So now all of this has been turned on its head. That we're talking about ancient history now. But knowing that Carter died at the age of 100, it is interesting. He was an interesting person. He wasn't like other politicians. He wasn't really a bombastic, outspoken, enthusiastic, obviously charismatic person to the camera. He had that Southern accent. You know, he was formerly the governor of Georgia, and during his time, he hung a picture of Martin Luther King in the State House or the governor's mansion, and that was, for Georgia, that was extremely controversial. And you'd say, well, why? Well, there's the legacy of racism there, and he was considered a bold, progressive person in his age, in his day, but his presidency did not turn out well, and Reagan just mopped the floor with him. And I know, just to be fair, you know, the media at the time when Reagan was running made so much about Reagan was a warmonger and the MX missiles and this and that. And, you know, Carter's policies were almost the same as Reagan in defense, but they were just a little bit less. And the media really piled on Reagan to say he was a warmonger, but Carter just got, his campaign just fell by the wayside next to the overwhelming Reagan revolution. And now he's gone at age 100. So the other thing I wanted to talk about here, now there's been a lot of Biden in the news this month, back and forth. We have a Biden's pardon. We have the media's reaction to Biden's pardon. And then we have the blaming of Biden. And we also then have some more statements from Biden about complaining he wasn't allowed to run against Trump, despite having won the primary. His party wouldn't let him. So all of this isn't random. There's a kind of back and forth and a tit for tat, which I'll try to explain a little bit here. First we have Biden's pardon of his son. And this was the first. I think if you're smart, you will realize that Biden, by doing this, feels a little resentful of his party because this is the most kind of negative thing he can do. It will make any pardons that Trump hands out during once he becomes president. Just say, look, Biden had a whole slew of pardons himself, and these were obviously self-serving pardons for his own son. The liberal media piled on him. Here we have a reliable liberal media, The Atlantic, Biden's unpardonable hypocrisy. President vowed not to pardon his son, Hunter. It did so anyway. He's got nothing to lose. And then we have Joe Biden's parting insult. This article is particularly good. It has some interesting background to him. It's kind of shocking. I remember vividly, I believe it was in the 1988 elections, again, going all back to the Reagan Revolution days. Biden was around then and running for president, even way, way back then. Is that 40 years ago almost? During that time, he had to drop out of the primaries after it was discovered that some of his speeches had plagiarized material in it. And, I think anytime you see that a politician has plagiarized stuff in it or segments from other speeches like Melania Trump, politicians aren't writing these speeches. They read the speeches, other people write them, and you just have some dumb intern or somebody who copy and pasted, and either on purpose or accidentally they didn't reconfigure the sentence or it wasn't plagiarized. So still the politician reading it has to take responsibility for his speech. So even way back then, Biden was around and embroiled in sort of kind of a silly scandal. And the article makes a great point about, Biden repeatedly ran for presidencies in different campaigns, different years when he was very unlikely to win, and then he skipped over other years where he was likely to win. And then this is one of these articles that is putting the blame of Kamala Harris's loss on Biden. And it says, I had this somewhere. Hold on. Okay. And see, this is the beginning of the tit for tat that we're going to see throughout the month. So the media is trying to reorganize itself. The liberal media that supports the Democratic Party is trying to organize its thoughts. So here we have in 2024, Biden insisted on waging a doomed campaign for re-election just long enough to discredit the Democrats who closed ranks around him, then left the party with an unprepared, presumptive nominee in Kamala Harris. So they're putting it squarely on him that his insistence that he was going to be president again doomed the party. I don't know if that really can be said to be true because the party was able to remove him after the primary process, after everyone had voted for him, and they certainly knew that his cognitive decline was very bad before that. So I think the Democratic Party at large just made a bad bet. They thought they could get away with this, and they thought that nobody would be paying attention to someone like Trump. And it also talks about the flip-flops. They have suddenly, we have this George Floyd era of very light policing in the big cities, and then the Democrats switch back to try the law and order. Again, the Democrats start the Biden administration with this weird, unprecedented open borders thing, allowing people to come in and taking the care of the illegal aliens very well once they move into the country. And then after that, Biden tried to switch that up and say he was going to switch these policies and be tough on the border. So yeah, he had a tough situation. And I've harped on a lot about the world order. The world order has collapsed during the Biden administration. We have China saber rattling, essentially at war with some of our allies like Cambodia, or not with Philippines, essentially making Cambodia a vassal state, saber rattling in the South China Seas, making all kinds of open threats. Obviously, they sense U.S. weakness and distraction. We have Russia. They made their move into the Ukraine on Biden's watch. You can argue about it all you want. And the way you top this off, you have then Hamas, Iran making its move in the Middle East against Israel with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And you even have countries, this is the topper, Venezuela. They just said, well, as long as everyone can start taking over countries, they had a referendum to see if they should invade their neighbor and take their oil-rich areas. So everyone sensed that drift. And here's something, this is president who wasn't there. What we're learning about the Biden White House is reminiscent of Woodrow Wilson. Famously the president who had a stroke near the end of his term. He wasn't seen again, but then his wife would go in the room and bring out supposed orders from the president, and it was thought, well, he was very far gone, and it was just the wife making decisions on his part. It is kind of funny how the media is saying like, oh wow, we're just hearing about this. Now this is from Peggy Noonan, a sort of right-leaning author, but this is. It's funny that the media didn't latch onto this, didn't have the ethics anymore to talk about this during the presidential campaign. I've often talked about, I don't really love Trump, but, Trump has some points. But if you think Trump has some points, it doesn't mean I have to accept that, that Biden is everything was wonderful with Biden to counterbalance it. I mean, obviously the situation was with Biden. So even if what I'm meaning to say is, if you don't like Trump, it doesn't mean you had to say that everything was fine with Biden. But that seems to be what the media was telling us. It seemed to be what social media was telling us as well. This is kind of a joke here. People were making fun of this. That, again, the news media's coming out like they were completely shocked to know that Biden was in decline. Why didn't they report this? Oh, it was just an overlooked story. There's a lot of bias in the media. And again, this is a lot of slamming of Biden that seems to be okay now because of Biden's pardon. Biden was obviously upset with his party. This sort of a friendly article. Again, casting his presidency in the vein of a Jimmy Carter-esque presidency. And then we get to the end of the month here where here's Biden striking back. See, he's seen all this stuff which says, oh, wow, the insiders in the White House were keeping the secrets of Biden's cognitive decline from us. No one had any idea about what was going on. Again, and they're laying the blame for the loss at Biden's feet, that he was the one who insisted he was going to run, et cetera, et cetera. So here comes Biden back saying, wait a second, I'm not going to take the blame for that. And saying he could have beaten Trump. And then just another reliably left-leaning publication carrying this story, Biden reportedly regrets ending re-election campaign. It says he'd have defeated Trump. So I just wanted to make the point on these kind of articles that these cycles of news, like the Biden's pardon, then a week later, the media unloading on Biden laying the loss of the election at his doorstep, and then another week later we have Biden hitting back with something like this, saying he could have beaten Trump. All of this is not just random news. A politician, a seasoned politician, no matter what his mental acuity, like Biden, is going to know how to play the game, and he's not going to go out as the guy who lost to Trump, which is, I think, what the media is trying to lay at his doorstep. And he's saying, they didn't allow me to run and go all the way. They forced me out. We don't know who forced him out. The mysterious people who legally run these parties got rid of him at the last moment. So that's two people I was thinking about at the end of this year. Biden and Jimmy Carter. Those were a lot of thoughts off the top of my head. I hope it wasn't too incoherent. I'm trying to look at the threads of history, and we had that very interesting situation where we can look and compare and contrast the Jimmy Carter presidency era, the Biden presidency, and a lot of the things that transpired in between it. And certainly going forward into the new year, it's going to all be Trump. Wow. For one way or another, I think we're going to have a lot to talk about here. I hope you will tune in, and I'll try to add the context and commentary so we can really understand what's going on besides just the biased headlines of the moment. And I hope you'll like and subscribe. As I noted at the beginning, I've been doing this for some time because I like to do it, but I'd also like to get more people watching. If you enjoy it, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Sometimes people have left a comment that says I need to get a haircut or something. Am I a drug dealer? No, I am not. I'm an old timer that grew my hair long for no good reason. So, Happy New Year, everybody. I wanted to show you my tree back here, my white tree, and wish you a belated Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And let's go forward together in 2025. Subscribe to my channel, please, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.